places for different groups. So the other half day you had to do your own thing. But because we're now short 2 days, they were all combined together, and we had him for the full day for the 5 days we were there. So that was actually a lot better, much better. Okay, let's see. I'm guessing forward goes forward. But anyway, this is Lord Howe Island. It is a 7 million year old volcanic explosion that has gradually eroded. The caldera has been breached. It's got this lagoon in it, but it still has some of the rock parts there, which is what you see there. Let's see if this works. Right. Okay. So this is a map of the Lord Howe Island. The centre part, the lagoon. The map faces approximately approximately east. So the northern part of the island is to your left and the southern part is to your right. And the two big peaks you saw in the first slide are on the right. They're massive peaks. Mount Gower is the one on the far south, and then the other one just north or east of it is Mount Lichberg, and they're about 800 metres high, which doesn't sound a lot, but let me tell you, it is a hell of a lot. And we did not get to climb it. It is just too hard to climb it. It is the peak of the experience of going to Lord Howe Island, but we did not get to see it, unfortunately. You would need to do a lot more because it is a day's climb, and one of our tour group went on it, and they had like 20 minutes at the top, at the tableland. And that's the jewel of the crown of the whole bloody island, and you get 20 minutes to see it. So it didn't seem worthwhile. This is what you see, well, this is what I saw flying in. I was on the wrong side of the plane. I was on the left side of the plane. On the right side of the plane, you would have seen Mount Lichberg and Mount Gower. But anyway, let's see if I can get the pointer. Yes. So this is the north end. This is North Head, Mount Eliza. This is the settlement where you stay. This is North Beach, Lagoon, Pacific Ocean. And basically only 400 people can be on Lord Howe Island as tourists at any one time. And there's about 300 residents who are there basically to look after those 400 people. That's about all they do. They might grow a few things, but that's really all they do. And 400 people is maintained strictly, so you can only get on if someone else gets off. So when there's no flights there, people can't go or leave, and they just have to stay an extra day. So anyway, we landed, that was mid-afternoon landing. That's the group we were with from AMSA. It was about, 15 of us, something like that. We all stayed at one set of apartments, which was great. We basically all went together on those group tours. It left us maybe an hour in the morning, 2 hours in the midday and 2 hours in the afternoon to do our own thing, and people did do their own thing, but otherwise we were pretty much together. The guide isn't shown in there, he'd gone off and done his own thing. But anyway, it was a great group to be with and a great stay. So I'm going to start by showing you some scenic shots of Lord Howe Island, just to give you a feel for what we were able to see. So this is the lagoon, and I'm standing somewhere near the boat pier. So you can get on boats, there's a boat there, you can go on boat cruises, you can do snorkeling, you can do all sorts of things, bird tours, a whole range of stuff. So this is Mount Lichberg, which is about 750 metres high, and this is Mount Gower, which is 800 metres high. And you know, it's a volcano, so everything is very steep, or was very steep. So that's why this is very difficult. And the story goes that at one point you have to don a safety hat and hang on to a rope to get past, it's almost the first part of the journey, to get along a cliff edge. And then you can ditch the hard hat and climb up. But as you can see, it's pretty steep, and this is the tabletop where there's a montane cloud forest. That's where all the unique things are. So Lord Howe Island, being a volcano, when it erupted and cooled down and settled down, had nothing on it. no living things. But things do come to volcanic islands. Galapagos, Hawaii, all those islands were all settled by animals, plants, insects of all sorts. And how do they get there? A variety of ways. Some fly, some swim, some are carried on other things, some get blown by the wind. So a lot of the plants and animals on these remote islands are similar to animals and plants that are in surrounding places, but depending on how long they've been isolated, they can evolve and become quite distinct and therefore endemic and brand new. So that was what we were hoping to see, brand new stuff that doesn't grow anywhere else and we hadn't seen anywhere else in Australia. So the days were spent doing relatively easy but difficult tours. They were still difficult. This is a transit hill, as it says. That was probably 200 metres high above sea level, 250 metres. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's still, pretty hard work. And most of Lord Howe Island that isn't cultivated is basically rainforest of a variety of different sorts. It might be different vegetation types, but it's essentially a closed rainforest. You're in amongst the trees. And for somebody from the Wildflower Society, we're all about the flowers, right? It's pretty bloody boring. And it's pretty bloody difficult to know what you're looking at. Because if there are flowers, they're usually way up there, 10, 15, 20, 30 metres, if they flower at all. So it's a hard thing for us to go there and actually identify things. And even if you have a tour guide and he tells you what they are, I think you'll remember it for a microsecond, except for me. And that's my problem. I get left behind. And the tour guide said, no one is to get left behind. You are not to dawdle. So, shit. That was hard. That was harder than the walking. Harder than the walking. Anyway, here we are. We finally get there. This was a morning walk. I think we probably left at 9 o'clock and it took us 2 hours to get up there. We stopped a lot on the way. The tour guide did stop and talk about things. And here we have Mount Leechburg in the background, Mount Gower. And if you really want to see what it looks like from there, well, that's what it looks like. So we got a little bit closer than just the flight. And we saw it from quite a few different angles. And boy, I would have loved to have gone up there, but you can't do everything. What we did was pretty good, let me tell you. What we couldn't do would have been better, but what we did do, was pretty good. So this is what you see from the airport. The plane landing and takeoff is an adventure. The runway is too short. It's too short, so you can't get a big plane there. So that's another thing. There has to be very small planes that maybe holds 30 people, something like that. So, that's why you can't get a lot of people on the island at any one time. I think there might be 2 flights a day, so that's only 60 people. But
and it has to be clear, no clouds.
No clouds. And the reason we were delayed and cancelled was that they had a thunderstorm over the island. And because the airstrip is so short and it's affected by these mountains, you just can't fly a plane when the weather isn't perfect. And that's why they cancelled a lot. In fact, the following tour after ours was before the conference. The second tour was after the conference. They also had a cancellation for 2 days. And most of the people on that tour from AMSA didn't end up going. They went home and lost their deposit and all the money they made, unless you had travel insurance, which we did. So we got our money back. So, okay, back on ground level. We took a tour from the residential area where we were staying across the lagoon to North Head. So that's North Head. And this is Mount Eliza. And again, you don't think much of this, but don't forget, this is a remnant of a volcano. So the top part of that climb is pretty steep. And of the group, I was the only one who did it. For a number of reasons, The rest of them took the easy path and went this way. But that was to my benefit, as I'll show you in a minute. So we took a catamaran to get across, and we spent time on the beach, looked at fossils on the beach, plants on the beach, birds on the beach. Went through the gulch here to an opening and climbed around the gulch to go bird watching, and we'll see some of that in a minute. But that's a closer up of Mount Eliza, so it got pretty steep towards the top. But let me tell you something. The view from the top is just amazing. So this is me. So the group that didn't go up here, as I said, went this way, and Donna was amongst them. And the tour leader had a drone, which I didn't know. And I went with my CB, as I do everywhere, and Donna had hers, and we communicated. And I was 2/3 of the way, and I said to Donna, "Where are you?" She said, "We're at the gulch watching the birds. Hurry up and get to the top. Ian wants to take a photo of you with his drone." So I get up there, and there he is with his drone. And isn't that just a fabulous shot? Unbelievable. So again, the lagoon, Mount Lidgebird and Mount Gower. And this is the gulch that you can get through from the lagoon, and you walk down here to a rock beach basically, and then we walked along here. Half the people walked along there because it was really rocky, steep. The path was maybe 1/2 a metre wide or less. And we went to a brown noddy colony over here, and I'll show you the results of that. But on that walk, I went because I wanted to see some real wildflowers. I thought, you know, this is a good chance to see something different, because the people doing this were still in closed rainforest. They did go here and see birds, which I missed out on, but I didn't really, because I saw birds flying over my head here, which I have photographs of. So this is another remnant of the volcanic eruption, which is Ball's Pyramid. It's about 30 kilometres or so, I think that's about right, from Lord Howe Island itself, and it's the remains of another fissure, and that's basically a spire. That's again something like 600-700 metres high, and some people have climbed it, including people from including people from a museum. And in that journey, at the top of the pyramid, and we're talking, you know, 600-700 metres up, in what's almost bare rock in a crevice, they found the world's biggest stick insect, the phasmid, which is something like this long. It had been heard of before, but no one had seen it in like 60 to 100 years. And they happened to come across one in a crevice. Since then they've been back. I don't know whether they've taken one back to a museum to breed. I think that may have happened, and there's now something like 40 in the world, but stick insect, monstrous. In fact, Mark Heath wanted to know whether I'd brought one back with me. And I said, sorry, no, I think you've got to be an abseiler and, you know, really experienced rock climber to get there. So you can take a boat to go there. Not looking good. You can take a boat. We didn't take that boat.
Which direction is it from Lord Howe Island?
It's essentially southeast.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So there is a boat tour that goes there, and you go bird watching, oceanic bird watching. There are birds that do nest on the island, on the shore, on the rock. I mean, there's no shoreline per se. Oh, I can't go to the next one. Oh. So none of our group did that, I don't remember. Some others did take snorkeling tours and went into the lagoon on their 2-hour off, or one didn't go on one of the half-day tours or something. So there are lots of things to do. There are really a lot of things to do. I wish I could do it more often, but it is quite expensive. The air flight is pretty expensive, as you can see. They don't take a lot of people. The island has to be basically self-sufficient, or everything has to be imported, so everything's very expensive. They have very stringent quarantine procedures, but not obviously stringent enough. But on our way back from the flight, we heard that the boat meant to be coming with supplies to feed the next lot of tourists had been quarantined in Port Macquarie in Newcastle, New South Wales. And that was going to be a week while they undertook inspections and treatment. I think they detected mice or something. So I don't know what happened after we left, how many people had to come or stay or what happened. But anyway, this is how seriously they take quarantine. But unfortunately, I found out in February this year, they had an incursion of myrtle rust. And they shut the island, well, they didn't shut the island down, but they shut all the walks down. So you could still come and stay at their residential accommodation, you could still go on boat tours and scuba tours and stay in the lagoon, but you just couldn't go into any of the bushland. They think they'll be able to remove the myrtle rust because it has come before, apparently. I don't know how they fixed it up, but I think it was a combination of herbicides and observation and collecting the infected material. So if you know anything about myrtle rust, it's very easy to see because it's bright yellow, but it's basically impossible to control because it's windblown. But you can also bring it in on your clothing, on your jumper, on your sock, on your backpack, anything. So it's not like phytophthora where you can just clean your feet. You basically need to bag all your clothes and have a second set and put them in there as you leave a place that's been infected, and then wash that when you get home without exposing it to the air. And we had been prepared to do that, and in fact, I'm the National Conservation Officer for AMSA, and I made the advice to all the participants who were coming to AMSA that that's what they should do, because New South Wales does have myrtle rust in certain places. What we didn't know was where it was. So, we had people coming from South Australia, Victoria, Queensland, Tasmania. Now, some of those places have myrtle rust themselves. The WA does not, well, at least except the East Kimberley. We now have myrtle rust in the East Kimberley, just over the border. You've got this under control, girls?
Yeah, 2 seconds. We're not girls.
Ladies, I'm filling in the spaces here.
Sorry, no, 2
Hope
minutes.
I'm doing all right. So a lot of our plants are myrtaceous and would suffer tremendously if we had myrtle rust in WA. And it's doing a lot of damage to New South Wales. So the native guava is a myrtle plant that's seriously under threat in subtropical New South Wales and Queensland. So the next set of pictures that I'm going to show is of flora. So bearing in mind that there's not a lot of flowering plants on Lord Howe Island, I'll have a mixture of flowering plants and rainforest plants, but it'll still be interesting, I hope. So I did create some figures which some of you may have read on the Facebook site or the advertisement, but I didn't print it off me as to how many endemic plants and animals there are on Lord Howe Island. Maybe somebody can read that off for me because I didn't print it off. But there are quite a few, but there's also a lot of plants that exist in Queensland, New South Wales and even New Zealand on there. And some that do grow in WA, like oceanic plants. So warrigal greens, I've never eaten them, but they're supposed to be very good for you and were eaten by the early colonists. They're not nice? Bitter. Bitter, I think, aren't they?
I've got a grow if you want some.
I'll bring them up next time. But anyway, they were in flower when I was there, and I have a photograph of them. Oh, we've got somewhere.
No, that's
Got
just
something.
That's just the computers back.
No, it's not Lord Howe Island. They don't have. I don't think they have any mistletoes on Lord Howe Island. They may do. They have a lot of parasitic type plants.
Mm.
So I'm not very good at rainforest plants. So there are myrtles in rainforest. So syzygium is a myrtle, and that's a huge tree. And it's got huge buttress roots like a fig. And you'd think it was a fig. In fact, I thought it was a fig, but it's a myrtaceous plant. And there are lots of ferns, and I'm not really into ferns. But I have some fern pictures for you, for those who are into ferns. I'm also not typically into palms, but I've got some palm pictures for you because Lord Howe Island is the source of the world famous, world demanded plant, the Kentia palms that went to all Victorian drawing rooms. And in fact, the economy of Lord Howe Island at one time was totally supported by the export of Kentia palm nuts. Not so much anymore. And we got taken through a Kentia palm plantation. But there's a second palm that is in that same family, Howeana, that I still to this moment can't very easily distinguish between. One of them has arching fronds and the other has sort of flat fronds, but it's very subtle. And they both have big nuts, and I forget how they are arranged. One's arranged slightly different than the other, but I've got pictures of them, but I'm still not going to be able to tell you how I know which is which, because they are very similar. But they do grow naturally on the island. Lord Howe Island has, in the past, been invaded by feral animals, and it has caused the extinction of 3 or 4 native fauna, birds and animals, but particularly. Oh, I'm back.
You're back.
I'm back.
I'll let you get in the right
So
spot.
why did it stop?
Oh,
Do I have to keep
the laptop ran out of power.
Ah.
Sorry about that.
All right. So, okay, we'll get down from the hill. We've talked enough about Bird Wall's pyramid, so we'll now go to the floor. Okay. So we were lucky enough to see a couple of orchids. So rainforests do have orchids, but they're not what we normally think of here as orchids because they're epiphytic. And even if that epiphytic is quite low on the ground, they're still epiphytic and not in the ground. So this one was actually quite low to the ground. And they called it a Christmas orchid because it flowers in March. No, this was September. But I don't know why they call it Christmas. Maybe it hangs on that long. Or maybe in New South Wales it flowers at December. I don't know. And Lord Howe Island has a different environment. So I think we saw 3 of these. They're a fairly big bush. Because as I said, they were low to the ground, but they were epiphytic from memory on the plant. This one is also epiphytic. Dendrobium brassicaulis, variety Howeana. So this is a New South Wales plant, the Dendrobium, but it's got a slightly different form on Lord Howe Island, which is why it's called Ver Howeanum, yellow cane orchid. I don't know whether it smells, but I'm guessing it probably does. So here we have a fern, a kangaroo fern. I photographed this because I quite liked, the little pustules on here. I think they're pustules, either that or they're sporangia. They may be sporangia.
Sporangia sounds better.
Yeah, sporangia sound better, but they look like pustules. So that's the feature of ferns. They have all these things on the backside of their leaves. They're the basic reproductive things. And then they have this Wallenbergia, which grows throughout the rest of Australia. In fact, we have it in WA as well. So I didn't know what it was. So most of the plants, when I photographed them, particularly when I was on Mount Eliza, I had no idea what they were because I didn't have my guide with me. So I just photographed whatever was in bloom, you know. So I then had to work it out and ask the expert what it was that I saw, and he said, "Oh shit, you've done very well. You've done better than most people would have done by themselves going up that mountain." So I felt pretty chuffed. So I spent time identifying it from the Flora of Lord Howe Island webpage.
It's not working.
Not working. Well, hang on. Nope. There we go. Oops. Too far. Let's see if we go.
I think my magic's run out, Eddie. Now.
Okay. I'll go slow. Okay. So here's another fern. So I wanted to take pictures of ferns that weren't your traditional blechnums and other, leafy ferns. And this is certainly very different.
Have you got a fly in there as well?
Probably. I like insects. Yeah, I like insects in my photos. I take them where possible. So I'm an expert at these names now. Now this plant actually grows in WA. It grows on our seashores. I actually photographed this at Ocean Reef when I went on a UBC tour to stop the Hillary's Marina. I didn't know what it was at the time, but this was on the sandy seashore of Lord Howe Island as well. Much nicer there than here. And again, I got another insect. Have to have my insects in my photos. This is a very unusual plant. Not quite a creeper. In fact, I'm trying to remember this now. I think this was it's an arching flowering stem that comes off the lower trunk of a tree. I think that's how that one is. But I'm trying to remember now. And this is taken, if people know anything about photography, this was taken, I think, at 64,000 ISO.
Very dark.
Very dark. In other words, very, very dark. You can see that because it's quite grainy, but the photos turned out reasonably well. This was a plant I photographed on Mount Eliza. Very common plant. In fact, it grows in the Kimberley. Somebody at the herbarium today had one in their stuff to identify. And so I knew exactly what they were talking about because it's a tropical plant. Pandaria pandarana, a vine. I thought the flowers that I'd seen in Queensland on another AMSA tour were much prettier than this. And these were a bit boring, but okay. They're a bell-shaped vine. This is a beautiful plant. Crinum pedunculatum, swamp lily. Saw it in a couple of places on Lord Howe Island, one on the seashore and one in a swampy area. I was in Brisbane 3 weeks ago. It was planted in a roadside garden, so it's quite common. It really is nice, well worth having as a cultivated plant, even if it's not from WA. This was a hard plant to photograph because the first thing we saw of it was these spent flowers on the ground, and the flowering tree had them up 5 metres up, and I didn't think I'd ever be able to get a photograph. So this is taken with the telephoto lens because they were that high up. So Sephora, it's a family in the pea family, a genus in the pea family. Lignum vitae. Again, a lot of plants on Lord Howe Island that are endemic have the Howe, Howiana, Howinsa epithet to show that it's endemic to Lord Howe Island. I thought when I saw this Carpobrotus, oh, I've seen this before. It grows at Chingara, but it doesn't. This was right at the top of Mount Eliza. I had to almost fall off the cliff to take a photograph of it. That's how, you can see the ocean down here. It was right on the cliff edge. Bluish pig face because the leaves are a bit more blue than normal green. But otherwise it looked a lot like a Carpobrotus, except it was more closed. I didn't really see any that were fully open like we normally see our Carpobrotus. But Dodadea viscosa is quite a common plant around Australia. I think we even have it in WA. If not in the southwest, certainly in the Kimberley. No flowers on this, and mostly recognised and identifiable through the fruit, which is often ridged or horned, and that's usually the most characteristic thing to look at when you do the ID. But if you have a look at both the male and female flower, they're very, very small, and I'm talking 5 millimetres. They are really, really nice. Really, really interesting. This was another plant I photographed in my hurry up Mount Eliza. I didn't have a lot of time because they said, Eddie, you've got to be back for the boat. And the boat leaves at 4 o'clock on the dot. And this was like 2:30. And they were all going round the other side, and I had to climb up 200 metres and then come back and take my wildflower photographs and photograph the birds. So I thought I didn't have a lot of time. In the end, I beat them back to the boat spot. But anyway, this was a very shrubby, low-growing bush, maybe 1.5 metres high, with very, very small flowers. These are each probably only 5-6 millimetres in diameter. And unfortunately, my photo isn't the best because the lighting wasn't great and my camera the flash didn't work on it very well. Shrubby muttonwood, suggesting that there's another plant called a muttonwood that might be 5 metres high. And in fact, I think there is. But I don't know that we got to see it, or if I did, it was pointed out to us by our guide and I didn't get a photograph of it. Myoporum insulare grows in WA. I've seen that at Durian, for example, so it's not uncommon. And here's your Warrel greens, Tetragonia tetragonoides. small yellow flowers, maybe 8 millimetres across, and very leafy. So I had to put in these almost insignificant flowers because I found so few flowers to show you. So I had to resort to some fruit as well. So we know about, there's one elixir in WA. I should know because it's in my book. But
Buxifolia.
Huh?
Buxifolia.
Buxifolia, there you go. And the flower of that is very nice. But it also has a berry. But I've never seen a berry on this one. I saw this first on our AMSA tour of Queensland. So I sort of knew what this was.
How big was it again?
The fruit is probably 12 millimetres, something like that. And it forms this chain of 2, 3, 4 or 5 fruit. So I'm now going to turn to non-flowering things. So this is our Kentia palm page. So this is the Kentia palm, and this is the fruit of it. Comes down in a great big spray, and lots of fruit. I don't know, maybe 100 fruit on here. And this group was pointed out to us to distinguish between the two. So the Kentia palm is this big one over the top, and the Balmoral palm is this one. And this one, I think, has a slightly more curved frond than the other, and it is shorter. But, you know, in isolation, how are you going to tell? You have to have the comparison there. Because the fruit, to me, even though that looks red, and it is red, this also turns red, so you can't go on the colour alone. I think it's got something to do with how, as I said, the fruit are on the stalk, but I've forgotten what the details are, sorry. Big tree fern, Cyathea howiana, obviously endemic to Lord Howe Island. Quite a tall fern with very long fronds, and most of that is empty fronds without, or peduncle without fronds on the end. And the trunk is very bristly, a bit like pricklebark. Eucalyptus todtiana, you wouldn't want to rub against it. And then this is maybe the biggest of, whoops, sorry. This is the biggest of the pandanus, and we have Pandanus spiralis in the Kimberley, which is quite interesting because the leaves go in a spiral, and it does have this fork, but if you were in here, it'd be like you were in a prison because you couldn't get through. It was just impenetrable. And this probably was 5 metres high, if not more. And then the vines. Well, crikey Moses, where does a vine start and where does it end, and what does it have? If it really didn't have a flower, I wasn't super interested, but I thought I'd better take some pictures of vines. People back home will want to know what I saw. So I believe this plant is toxic. Maybe if you touch it, you have a reaction. And what this Burnie bean has, I'm not quite sure. It's probably got a great big bean like this, I don't know. But certainly we didn't see it, but you know, this is it growing all over the place. And that's what you get in rainforests. They're impenetrable because of all the lianes. This was probably the most spectacular of the tree things we saw. They were all over the place, not just in one place, monstrous. So each of these is one plant. And some of them take up a hectare in space, in size. Because they basically grow around another plant, then dominate it, strangle it to extinction, though it's not called a strangler vine, and then send down all these aerial roots. And those aerial roots become these trunks. And yeah, they're massive. They're buttressed at the base, can be really, really monstrous. So I just couldn't stop taking pictures of them because each one is so unique and so interesting. But I have to stop. So this is the syzygium I was talking about, one of the myrtles that has the buttress, huge buttress roots that make it look like one of the figs, which do have buttress roots as well. But then this is the top of it. Again, it still looks like a fig, but I didn't see any fruit. But syzygium, typically, they're lily-pillies, right? And so they have little fruit and little flowers, but I mean, you can't get up there in that tree in a hurry.
Zoom not good
Huh?
enough. Is Zoom not good enough?
Oh, I didn't actually see any, and the guide didn't say there was any there, so I didn't take a photograph of it. We were also taken through a plantation where the settlers grew different kinds of pines. So Norfolk Island pine, hoop pine and bunya pines all have different characteristics. So this is the hoop pine. You can see the little hoops along the trunk. So that makes that easy to distinguish. Bunya pines, we have some growing in Perth. They have the big bunya nuts. Oricariaceae, so they're all part of that same family, that very ancient family that in fact the Woolamai pine belongs to. Araucariaceae. Bunya pine is Bidwillii. I forget what hoop pine is, and I don't remember what Norfolk Island pine is either. But we also had some fungi nuts on our trip. So we saw this morel. I'd never seen a fungus like this before, though some similar ones do grow in WA. I've never seen one. But it was good to see that. All right, now we turn to some birds. So if you're only here for the wildflowers, you can go now. You don't have to look at the bird shots. They're probably the best feature of my photography and trip. So I had a new camera and a new lens, and I was dying to try it out on these birds that, typically a long way away, soaring over the seas, climbing high in the sky. But I got some shots, I think, that you might like. So this white tern was very easy to photograph because it actually roosted, and not just at night, but all times of the day, in the Norfolk Island pines at the residences, at the settlement. And when I'm talking roosting, they're maybe 3 metres up. So you can get within 5 metres of them and they don't mind you too much. So lots of good opportunities to take pictures of white terns. But of course, the difficulty is getting good ones in flight. So that was my aim. So this one, I shot from Mount Eliza. It came really close. And I probably have 100 photos of footy terns, but in all sorts of angles. But I thought this one was the nicest of all. So yes, really nice to get close amongst the birds. This little grey ternlet was probably within 5 metres of us as well. It was at that gulch on the side of Mount Eliza that I pointed out to you, that we walked along a 20 centimetre wide path, and it was just sitting up in the crags, allowing us to take a photograph. Initially there were 2, and then on the way back there were 3. So that was nice.
That's fast reading.
Huh?
That's fast reading.
Good flying. So they're a ternlet because they're smaller than a standard tern. You can't see size from this, but they are. This was another shot in flight. It's not as good as some of my better ones of other birds because they were a bit further away. But black noddies, they almost look like a sooty tern. And I kept wondering whether it was a sooty tern or a black noddy, but they're darker. Or they almost look like a brown noddy, which I'll show you in a minute. But it's dark and it has this grey cap. But as I said, another bird similar to that had, like this bird. Looks very, very similar, especially from far away. So this bird was at a colony. There were maybe 100, 150 birds coming in and out, making a lot of noise, a lot of flight. So I've got birds in all stages of flying and descending and taking off and hovering. And it was just a great experience to see them in flight. I'll have to learn how to mimic them so I can do my next artistic interpretation. And for those who know what I'm talking about, they'll know what I'm talking about. And then this bird, this is a big bird, a noddy. This was photographed from probably 500 metres away, up on the cliff above Middle Beach, and it was basically gliding. So these are all oceanic birds, and they were just floating in the air, just floating past, not flapping their wing, just gliding. And again, I've probably got 50 shots of this species, but even so, they're far away, but with a good camera, that probably, I don't know, it's probably 1,000 pixels out of a 50,000 pixel shot. But it's great to get, first time I'd ever seen one of those. So masked because it has this black mark around the face. I was definitely hoping to see this bird. This has been on my bucket list for a long time. The red-tailed tropic bird, which you can see it at Cocos Island and Christmas Island, but also Lord Howe Island. So in walking along the gulch where the terns were, little ternlets and the grey noddies, there were red-tailed tropic birds flying overhead. So again, with a good lens, I was able to get a reasonable shot. And they had birds that we have here. Why did I need to go to Lord Howe Island? but I've never seen two together. And these are on the shoreline. These are on the ocean, and they fish in the ocean. So they're not just freshwater fishes. They're all sorts of fishes. And I'm sure they take land animals as well. So quite small, these birds, as you might know from having seen some yourself, but very cute. And this bird, there was no problem at all taking that bird. It came to your feet. So the first picture up here, it's taking a swim in a rain puddle on the path that we had to walk from our accommodation to meet our tour guide. And this one was in the rainforest under the banyans, scratching, and came right up to me. So these are endemic to Lord Howe Island. They were almost made extinct by the rats that were on Lord Howe Island up to about 20 years ago, but have recovered very well, and they're now running all over the settlement. As is that bird. That bird's running all over the settlement. You can get within 5 metres of that as well. Beautiful bird, beautiful colours. I'm not sure how endangered that was because of the rats, but I'm sure it was also endangered. And again, why did I have to come to Lord Howe Island to see that bird? That's very common around here. But, so there I'm saying, a lot of the birds are from surrounding places and they're not endemic. They've come by flying or swimming, or hopefully not on a boat, not like rats. Emerald dove, beautiful bird. I think the Lord Howe Island one is a variety of the one from New South Wales or Queensland, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But again, it's within 5 metres of you, just walking along the path. And they have their own version of the golden whistler. We have golden whistlers in WA, we have golden whistlers in New South Wales, but this one is slightly different apparently. Not quite sure why. It might be because the white patch here is just a little bit bigger, or the black bib is a little bit bigger, I'm not quite sure. But they were very hard to photograph because they hide in the trees. There's also a currawong, a pied currawong, a Lord Howe Island endemic subspecies, and a kestrel, which is all over Australia, in a Norfolk Island pine, which isn't endemic to Norfolk Island either. So to have all three of those pseudo-endemics in the one picture, I quite liked. And to have the predator and the scavenger in the one picture was fantastic. And I took quite a few pictures of those birds, and that's probably the pick of them.
Wow.
So luckily it took off and went from one tree to another. All right, now a bit of aquatic life. We're getting towards the end, so if you're feeling like you need some wildflowers, you don't have long to wait. So this is a dead animal. I would never have seen it in the ocean because I didn't go scuba diving, but it was on the seashore at North Beach next to Mount Eliza. The tour guide pointed it out to us. I think we may have seen 4 or 5 of them actually, and this is the biggest one. Don't know whether they're poisonous or what. I don't know whether they're good eating either, but with a leather jacket maybe it's not so good. It might be a bit tough.
It's a bit hard to pick the leather jacket.
Yeah. And there's a story about this that Ian told us, and I'm not sure how true it is, because I tried to verify it online and really couldn't get any confirmation of this. I think the name's right. Ian didn't tell us what the name was. But he said that the ones that are on the seashore are the result of an extinction event, because they're a mangrove snail and they don't have mangroves on Lord Howe Island anymore. They went extinct on Lord Howe Island that long ago. So these shells are from that time. That's the understanding I have, but I couldn't get that confirmed in any of the research I did. But this is obviously a very old one. It's been eaten into. I tried to get the best one I could, but that's the best I could. But anyway, Lord Howe Island is endemic to about 20 land snails. And it's very unusual, and it's a topic of great interest to many gastronomists, or whatever they're called. Not to eat, but I saw 2 of these. They are shy. You don't believe me? They look out for you, they've got very good vision. So this picture was probably taken 50 metres away. And they're in the rocks above the water level, but as soon as they see you, they scuttle into the water. There's a couple of species in just this genus. I think they also are found in New South Wales, so they're not endemic to Lord Howe Island. But aren't they a gorgeous crab? Just so colourful. Leptograxis variegatus. And swift-footed is right. They move quick. I didn't, so that's why they stayed around for their photo to be taken. So, I close with a sunset shot, taken on our first evening on the island. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation.